we start with our international guests. Colin, the parent-coach-athlete triangle. We've talked a lot about this. We had Kate Green. That was a central theme of this conference. Can you share examples of successful collaborations between parents, coaches, and athletes?
Most good academics answer their question with a question. I'll try not to do that. I'll try to actually give you an answer. One of the things that comes to my mind is the contextual nature of sport. So when we talk about coach-athlete relationship and coach-parent-athlete triangle, I think we need to think about which context we're talking about. So the first one that comes to mind, for example, is last summer we did some research with the English Rugby Football League. So Rugby Football League is a very aggressive game, hyper-masculine game, pretty much situated in working class northern English towns. When we turned up at some of these clubs, some of the things that I was really impressed with was the grassroots and the setup, and they'd really spent time thinking about the environment. When I say they, I mean the coaches, the club members, the parents. They even moved the sport from a winter sport in the north of England to a summer sport. So it wasn't quite freezing, it was a little bit better. And they did that for the benefit of the participants. So you can imagine young 7-year-olds trying to play rugby league in December in the north of England. It's not a great idea. But parents getting together with the governing body, with this club, moving into the summer. And then when we turned up, of course, the clubs had organised a really great environment. And when I say the clubs, I mean the parents and the coaches working together. So they played a small-sided version of the game that fitted the needs of the children. They actually had coaches on the pitch because the rules can be a little bit complicated at first. And the coaches were doing a great job of actually coaching each other's children, praising the other team when they were doing it really well. So these are 7, 8, 9-year-olds. They did a high five at the end of the game where all the children, all the parents had lined up down the sideline, and every child ran down the sideline giving a high five. So the last thing the child remembers from that game is getting a high five from 25 adults. And there's a recency effect, the idea that next time we think about rugby league, the first memory will be the last one, so it'll be a positive memory. And even at the sideline, it was very much picnic blankets, barbecues, and you had a scenario where it wasn't just parents there, but grandparents, people walking the dog to come and watch the environment. And I think why that struck me is, it struck me as an example of a scenario where parents and coaches had thought about what is the needs of our children and how do we reconstruct this environment to best meet those needs. Not just going what was always been done, but genuinely thinking what would be great. And we spent some time talking to the parents, and we learned that they did a raffle at the start of the game. So the away team would bring their parents and their team to the club, and they would all sell raffle tickets. And at the end, there was like a box of chocolates for whoever won. So the away team really liked it. But the money was going to a local charity. And you start seeing here that actually what we've really got is a sense of community happening. So I think that's a really good example in that grassroots sports context of what could be done. But we also have to think that sport happens in other contexts. So I'm thinking about a high performance context now. And actually speaking to rugby league coach as well, as they go up, what tended to happen was they tended to move away from the barbecues and the ice creams, and they started to mimic the professional game. So once it got to under 16, we had kind of like 5 coaches on the side, and performance analysts or pretend performance analysts, and big squads with subs, and then the home supporters were on one side and the away supporters were on the other. So it looked a bit more like the adult game as it got closer to that. And I remember one of the coaches just talking to me about how he just sent a WhatsApp every week to the parents, saying, this week we're working on defensive tactics. If you see your child bending their knees, having a white base, turning their head, make sure you praise them because that's what we were working on. And I thought that was a really good idea of a coach setting the tone, so that automatically the parents coming to that game weren't focused necessarily on the outcome, or weren't focused exclusively on the outcome. They were still wanted to win, but they were looking for, was my child in their defensive stance? Were they turning their head? So the coach had said that. And the coach actually took it a bit further and said, if you want to support your child, ask them questions about this. So why do we need? Because the parents will talk to the child when they get in the car after the game, no matter what. Even if we put them 200 yards away and say, stay away from the game, as soon as they get into the car, they'll talk. But the coach in the WhatsApp group just put some questions in. If you want to talk to your child and help them, ask them, why do they need that defensive stance? Why should their feet be balanced? Why should their head be turning? And ask them to give themselves a score on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do you think your defensive stance was? And what could you do better next week? And I thought that was a really good example of a coach guiding the parents in a way to support them that was appropriate to that context, which was different to the coach who's setting up the barbecues and the ice cream vans, which is in a different context. And I think the take-home message there is obviously communication between the two, but thinking about what are the needs of the athletes and then reconstructing our experience and our practice to meet those needs. I'm an academic, so I've gone on a bit. We should let somebody else get a word in.
Okay, thank you. Brilliant. Some practical examples to take note. Janet, balancing academics and sports can be a very daunting challenge for young athletes, as you might know. Given the intricacies in the relationship between the sport and the education systems in Malta, there are a lot of intricacies. How can educators, coaches, and parents work together to ensure that student athletes receive the support and resources they need to thrive in both areas?
So, a dual career is not easy. Balancing an academic career and a sporting career is not a walk in the park. So, yes, it's ideal and it should be encouraged, but athletes who wish to excel in both need a lot of support, both from the academic institution and from the sporting institution. Unfortunately, in Malta, we are still very much behind. For example, a couple of months ago, Malta hosted the Games of the Small States, a very, very prestigious competition, and a lot of the contingent were athletes. But how are these athletes supported? They weren't. Student athletes. I know athletes who had to leave the athletes' village in the middle of the games to go and sit for an exam because the educational institution didn't want to be flexible with their exam timetable. I also know other athletes who had to miss out on major championships because, again, the academic institution did not want to be flexible. So unfortunately this does happen a lot. And athletes who do wish to excel in both, they find these barriers from people who are supposed to be supporting them at the end of the day. So yes, it's easier said than done, this dual career. So you do need a lot and a lot of support.
So what would you suggest?
I think
from your own experience.
My own experience, I also experienced these resistances. I think even when it comes to the parents, for example, when it's exam period, you realize because at the track it empties. You don't see the students anymore. Why? Because the parents panic and they keep the children at home so that they study. There's this mentality that sport is a hobby or an extracurricular activity, when for most of us this isn't the case. This is our career. I think for me, I would equate it more with a part-time job that you don't get paid for because of the amount of hours that we put in and the sacrifices that we make to excel in the sport. And there's so much research that shows that sport and exercise does help with academic performance. performance, and it does enhance concentration. So there's no ground and there's no basis for completely stopping sport during exam.
You're a student athlete yourself.
I am.
You are completing your master's now
Yes.
in educational psychology. How did athletics actually help you in your study?
Athletics, it taught me so much. I mean, yes, I can sit here and I can say that it taught me discipline and it taught me the value of hard work and accountability, and it did. But I think I learned more from the dark side of sport. Unfortunately, injuries are a huge, huge part of the sport. And it's so easy to go into a dark place. But I have learned to get out from that dark place and to motivate myself to work on my rehab. And it's very, very difficult. I know athletes who don't come out from this dark place, and unfortunately that means the end of their career. So I think that athletes who are going through this hard time, they need psychological support and they need help so that they can develop these skills and coping mechanisms so that they can get out of this dark place as well. And this helps to instill values such as resilience and perseverance, which you use outside of the track, off the court and outside of the pool. For example, we all go through difficult times in our personal lives. So having these skills and these coping strategies will help you to push through the dark times and come out of it even stronger than before.
On this topic, does any one of you have any practical suggestions how we can facilitate and make life easier for our student athletes? Practical examples. Anyone? Ivan.
Janet, I'm perplexed because things are changing. I would like to hear also perspectives of other students. There's a swing in appreciating student athletes more than before. It's a pity that not all students find the same kind of help and support. However, things are changing, and from a present modern perspective, I think we need to look at not only students and athletes as separate, but also understand the responsibilities we have as educators coming from university, that students who are athletes have twice the material on their plate. So through the institute, and there's Professor Dichialis here who might want to interview later on perhaps, we are trying to get the message across to different faculties across the university that there needs to be help in tangible, practical ways to students who are pursuing a dual career. And we're seeing progress. We still get some resistance from some faculties because they look at sports differently than all here in the room. We are all biased here. And perhaps we put sport before even academics at times. And once we manage to get this culture change, that academics, not from physical education or sport, look at sport as not a subject in itself, but as the modus operandi, the way of life, then perhaps eventually we can have more student, tailor-made courses which put the student, put the athlete before the student for a simple reason. You can educate yourself throughout a lifetime. We mentioned the windows of trainability. I'm going to borrow that a bit from you. In education, that window of trainability is open throughout your life. But when it comes to athletic prowess, the window of trainability is open for a specific period of time. So how can an athlete be at university and his athletic prowess or improvement is shut down because of studies? Athletics needs to be given priority, and the courses rounded around those priorities. This is perhaps a long view ahead, but this is the direction we need to take. Sorry, Dr. Once you give me the mic,
No.
take it away from.
Bernice, the holistic, development of youth athletes. This should ideally involve a multidisciplinary approach. That's what we've been saying all the time. How can we encourage better collaboration and communication between professionals from different fields, such as sports psychology, nutrition, and education, to enhance the overall development of young athletes?
First of all, I would say that we as practitioners, we need to forget our egos and be willing to be vulnerable. Firstly, like today, attending CPDs, I was fascinated by all the talks and I learned a lot from all of the talks. And from the talks, I realized when I need to refer to an SNC, when maybe this is something more of a different psychological level than sports psychology. So when I'm saying forgetting our egos, it's more like some people tend to think that because they got a high level of education, they can deal with any kind of problem. And then they start by being, let's say, a psychologist. I'm going to use myself. Being a psychologist, then there's an issue with physiotherapy. Maybe I can deal with it. Let's see what I can do with it. Then there's an issue with nutrition. I know a little bit about nutrition. I've done a weekend course. Let me try to deal with it. And they never refer. It's good to have some knowledge of the different fields to guide the athletes, but you need to also know when to refer. You need to know your limitations. Also, we all the practitioners need to have the individual's well-being at our main priority. So we need to have that as our main why of why we're doing the profession. Also, of encouraging that collaboration and communication within the different professionals at a regular level. So this maybe comes from the institution, from the organization, it also depends whether the institution or organization has different professionals under one roof, because that's not a given. But if there are institutions offering this, they should encourage the collaboration by even weekly meetings, discussing different cases together and see how they can help each other out. Sometimes, from my experience, I sometimes had clients where it was somewhat difficult to figure something specific out. Things will be progressing, but there would be a sort of pause. And I'll be like, why can't I read this client? What's going on? Why can't I understand this client's story? What is this client trying to tell me? And sometimes you figure it out through different professionals, because maybe that client is much more comfortable discussing stuff with that professional rather than with myself. And it's fine. And that's why collaboration can help rather than hinder, because not all athletes are going to be comfortable with you if you're the only psychologist in that institution, for example. I hope they would be, but it's natural. But maybe they are very comfortable with the nutritionist, with the physio. And then that something would come up over there. Apart from that, all professionals need to give value to the observation aspect. So if there's a 2-hour training session, each professional should be observing the behaviors during training sessions, during games, because what is not being said is more important than what is being said sometimes.
Renzo, do you think that coaches are comfortable working within an integrated approach, as Bernice is saying? You're a football coach. as well. Would any sport-specific coach, be it athletics, water polo, football, any sport, be comfortable working with other professionals, a sport psychologist, a sport nutritionist, in an integrated approach, in an interdependent approach?
I risk to say that, generally speaking, because of course I'm not aware of all the coaching education going in the country, but generally speaking, when we talk about holistic coaching, we're touching on the technical, physical, psychological, and then maybe we touch some of the rest. But today we're talking about the political, the social, the economical, the environmental, and whatnot, and the parent involvement. So I think this term holistic has been defined and redefined for so long, rightly so. And I get the feeling that when the coach is talking about or thinking about the holistic development of the athlete, first of all, we have to differentiate between what the coach knows, what the coach thinks, what the coach talks about, and what the coach does. It's easy for me to talk about all the theories, no, and what I learned from Andrew and whatever, and what I learned from my courses. But what do I do? So that's the first thing. How holistic am I really? So that's one thing as a coach. But the coach is today I was a bit critical in the workshops, in the sense that most probably because there are many coaches, as you found on your screen, but it was like the coach is the savior, the coach does everything, and I'm like, guys, the coach is just one pawn on the chessboard. What are we talking about here? I mean, where is the minister? No, I said this last time, I'm saying it today. Where is the minister? Where is the parent? Where is the economist? Where is the financial guy from the club, from the association, and whatnot? Because at the end of the day, to be holistic, I was the national team coach under 14s, and she was our psychologist, and I'm doing this on purpose. Kultant, sometimes she comes in. Why? Because there isn't enough financial support to do it. So, is the coach ready to go into a holistic approach? The coach is trying his best, but the structure is not really ready to support the coach in the holistic approach, because I don't think that the coach is the savior. I think that everyone is contributing to this holistic approach. In the last conference I was sitting in Malta, someone from the government was being challenged with this. What about the environment out there? Any of our athletes cannot really go out and have a job, easily from home, and it's not even natural for us because the environment is not supporting that. We're talking about holistic, but what is holistic? Holistic is the environment. Holistic is going to swim and feeling safe to run on the pavement and not twisting your ankle. Holistic is going to school and knowing that medicine is not going to stop you from going to training because you have your own levels. Holistic is everything.
So should we redefine the role of coaches, or should we start talking rather than coaching or coaches, and we say a multidisciplinary team?
Yes.
The coach, the performance coaches on the performance team, sports science, and then there's the medical side, which we don't often, and we haven't mentioned it, but he comes or she comes in that whole perspective as well, because it's an integrated approach we're trying to emphasize.
I think, George, of course we need to differentiate between the levels, between the straight of coaching. Is it grassroots coaching? Is it developmental coaching? What coaching we're talking about here? And then we start talking about what the structures involved. I wouldn't imagine a coach who's coaching 8-year-olds, engaging with many discussions with the medical team or with the nutritionists, not because they are not important, but because probably the structures there will be more fun and fundamental and whatnot. But probably at a higher level, when the 14, the 16-year-old kid is doing the selection, making the selection, and then there's a physiotherapist. Then the skills of the coach need to be much higher in terms of communication, and I think there where we start moving from I think the term manager in the UK is helpful there in the sense that as coaches sometimes we become people who are managing a team. I'm not sure if it's us managing or someone is managing all of us, including the coach. That's something that has to be restructured and rethought as well. In some structures, it's the coach, the team manager, the Ferguson, to give an image, who's managing everyone. In other structures, the coach is one of the multidisciplinary team. And I think it depends on the structure. And I'm talking about structure all the time, because I don't want to leave here and say that the coach can save the system, because the coach is one of many people in the system. So, yeah.
Ivan, the concept of long-term athlete development has been discussed. Christian was very thorough in this concept. He also made very clear proposals also for the local scenario. How can stakeholders in youth sports now, including coaches, parents, other professionals, administrators, promote this approach to ensure that young athletes progress sustainably and achieve their full potential? Should we have maybe a common, a local, a Malta long-term athlete development model?
I think you gave the answer, George. You spoiled it for me.
Sorry, didn't mean it.
To answer that, we need 2.5 hours or perhaps 3 or even more. But yes, I mean, during the break, I had some students coming up to talk to me and telling me, oh, the LTAD, I remember those lectures with passion, you know. But ironically, and something which I will lead to what I'm going to point out in the coming seconds, perhaps minutes, is the fact that LTAD, information and knowledge, has been shared for the past 2 decades or so. And we've got the Foundations of Coaching course, and the great component from it is long-term athletic development and implementing that in practice. So the values model, coaches out there know about it. But the question would be, where is it being implemented, where is it applied? So if I had to recap and try to frame this within your question, George, I would pick a key word, which is, again, Bernie's collaboration, working togetherness. Now, I hope it's not just in the Maltese context, but we tend to be given adjectives like the Maltese are territorial people, the Maltese work in isolation, the Maltese coaches prefer to work separate from others. I hope it is not just unique to the Maltese context. Perhaps I would like to ask whether this is something which is also expressed others, but we need to face it. So if I had to give a solution to this, it is specifically focusing on the concept of collaboration and moving away from working in isolation. When I say working in isolation, I mean working in isolation within the sports club itself and also across different clubs and associations. So there is the coach working with coach, which was referred to earlier on. The coach and the administrator, and the coach and the parent. What do I mean working in isolation? Usually in an amateur setup, where there's no professionalism, no profession, you won't make money out of coaching. The easier way across, in an effective way, would be I do my coaching job, I do my 1 hour and a half, 3 times a week. I know what I'm doing, but it's irrelevant whether you know, as a coach coaching my boys later next year, that what I've covered and what I've done with you. Obviously, this takes collaboration between coaches within the club to understand progression of the athletes from under 6 going on to the competitive stages. But this also goes across, back to your answer to the question. Working together as clubs would be an even higher step to reach because of the concept of competing. So I'm competing against the club, but I recall an experience I had personally. When there was this basketball coach who came to Malta, this was over 25 years ago. This was 25 years ago. And we know the culture of the Americans. American culture is cutthroat competition, you know. Gold is winning gold, is winning silver is losing gold. We idolize the individualism in sport, Americans. So I thought Americans were the cutthroat competitors, but this coach told me, told the panel, the coaches, that one way to guarantee improved performance was that after the game, coaches get together and I share with you how I beat you. Why did I beat you? What are your weaknesses? And this surprised me. And I asked the question, you really do that? And he said, it's part of coaches' growth. Because by doing that, you will definitely work harder to improve your game. And he said, this is a guarantee of success. Now, what can be more collaborative than this perception? Try to implement that in the local setting. We are a unique Homo sapien. I will repeatedly say that. We are a unique species. Perhaps it's the small island mentality, but nobody would come up to me and tell me, can you share your weaknesses with the opposing coach? That's something which we won't do. However, the concept of collaboration, if we do not tap it now, it should have been tapped ages ago, we can never arrive to a perhaps practical implementation of LTAD across, not in a club, across the youth sectors of all the sports on the island.
And so I'll come back to you, if you don't mind. Looking to the future, what would be your vision for the ideal ecosystem, because this is an ecosystem that supports and nurtures young student athletes in a holistic manner? How can we collaboratively, continue on given state, work towards this vision? Can we take actionable steps and collaboration among stakeholders to work towards this vision?
Okay. I think I will start with the first word. She mentioned it already. Let's remove our ego. I mean, I've been working in dressing rooms now for 22 years, 23 years. And wow, that's a place of ego. Wow. But if we think that in the moment we're out of the dressing rooms, there's no more ego, I think we're totally wrong, because I've seen a lot of ego in clubs administration office, I've seen a lot of ego in associations offices, I've seen a lot of ego in education institutions leadership. How much do we really work? I mean, George, okay, now we've been in conferences, Andrew, you've invited me, I invited you, you invited me. But I will stop here. How much can we really collaborate together? 1, 2, 3, 4. How much? We cannot. As man, we can say let's collaborate, but we cannot. Because of leadership. But the schools are right, I will say the schools, okay, but it's already hard. It's my and at least I appreciate that's mine. We cannot. So we're here as academics today, saying let's collaborate, but it's hard. Because there's a lot of ego, not only in the dressing room, which is full of ego, there's many ego in the dressing room. You suspect. But there is a lot of ego at ministerial level, there is a lot of ego at education institutions, leadership level. So I think that's the first thing. That's the first thing. But can we remove this ego? Can we put it aside? I have a question. The other one, but we can only do this next step. I think when we remove the ego, okay, I'm going to risk saying this now, I'm not an employee of the MFA anymore, I have an ex. I don't know why we have the regional hubs and the National Sports School. I don't know why. I don't know why. Why don't we have one system working together? Why? In such a small, this is not England, this is not Italy, this is not 20,000 kilometers away. We are in what, 27 kilometers? We don't need so many systems, in my opinion. We can work more together, but of course not. That's the system I've created, this is the system I've created, those are your coaches, these are my coaches. Sometimes, honestly, I feel literally in the middle. I belong to MCAS, but I don't really care. I belong to MFA, but I don't really care. I mean, but Allah, probably bla ġobba, naqatta this sentence. We're too much stuck to our in nature, no, in nature. Għandna ħafna niċeċ. I think that's a problem. So the positive answer would be, as I was a psychologist, the positive answer would be remove ego and remove isolation. But to remove isolation, I think we need to remove the ego. It's very philosophical now, but I think it's very practical in the same time.
Janet, to equip young athletes with essential skills, life skills, what strategies and programs have proven most effective in your experience? How can these skills be integrated into the youth sports development process?
I mean, sport teaches you a lot. It instills you with so many values. I mean, personally, it taught me accountability, respect, time management, discipline. And these values are things that you use in the day-to-day. Like, I use them, it shaped me into who I am. It made me who I am today. I don't have this experience. I cannot relate to this holistic way of thinking because I've been doing this sport for 13 years now, and I was my own psychologist, I was my own nutritionist, I was my own strength and conditioning coach. So I had to take up all these roles for myself. So hearing all this and hearing this holistic approach, this student-athlete centered way of thinking, I'm quite jealous. Actually, I wish this was available when I was coming up. I was lucky enough to have a support system in my mother. She never made me choose. She understood that I wanted to prioritize both and that I believed that I could excel in both. And thank God I'm here today and I believe that I have. I still have a long way to go. But I do think that it all starts from home. It starts from the environment you're brought up in. It starts with the attitudes and the beliefs of the parents. Because if we're talking about a dual career, it's a dual career for them as well. Because they're the ones who are going to drive their child to sport. They're the ones who are going to support their child in school. So there needs to be more education. Education targeted towards the parents as well, so that we can put their minds at ease, because there is this panic, because there's this mentality that sport isn't going to pay the bills, and they're right. In Malta, it's not. So there needs to be this education about, yes, we're going to help you. There's going to be people like psychologists, the coaches, nutritionists, this whole team who's going to support the athlete and do everything they can to preserve the well-being of the athlete.
I'd like to see you working with someone like Dave McDermott, a performance lifestyle mentor, helping you to empower you with these skills, to learn these skills. How far would you have gone had you had this kind of mentor since the age of 12, 13?
There's no saying, really. No saying. I mean, in Malta, I feel like we give so much importance to the physical aspect of training. We do very well with, for example, at the track, killing ourselves at the track. But it goes beyond that. It goes what you do off the track as well, and how you're able to cope, even mentally. Being a student athlete is a very, very stressful lifestyle. But where are we being taught stress management techniques, coping techniques? We're not taught these things. It's very much learn as you go. But if you're 11, 12 years old, you need help. And being a student athlete, something we don't really talk about, it can be very lonely. Because while your friends are going out, you have to learn how to say no. No is the key word for a student athlete. No to staying out late, no to eating particular food, no to drinking, no to partying. You're constantly saying no. and the group of friends just gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
And consistency.
Yes.
Doing it every single day.
Yes. So
one of the most beautiful things Dave said earlier on is we have 2 ears, 1 mouth to listen twice as much. Do you think that athletes like you, we put you in the center because we wanted to stay true to our philosophy that we are athlete-centered, and do you think that athletes are listened to enough? Do we really listen, or is it the coaches want to say, the parents want to say something, the head of school or the teachers want to tell you, but do we actually listen to the athlete? Have you ever felt that we don't listen enough to the athlete?
Yes, I believe so. I think there are instances where the team is so large. Yes, we're seeing the positives of having such a large and holistic team, but sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming. And there's so much going on between the different entities. For example, the psychologist, the nutritionist, especially for example in instances when there's an injury, that the athlete is kind of put aside. Yes, we're fighting for the well-being of the athlete and we're trying to do everything that's best for them, but are we listening to them? Are we asking them?
Best intentions?
Exactly. It's just the delivery and the way that it's done that maybe could be improved, especially when the athlete is still very young. They're very ready to just go with whatever is being said. For example, when I was younger, if my coach told me to jump off a cliff, I probably would have done it. But now that I'm older and it's more of a collaborative relationship, so when the athlete is younger, we do need to be careful and make sure that they are part of the decisions being made, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be on the track performing or on the pitch performing. So,
Denise, youth sports can sometimes be highly competitive and demanding. Just look at any football festival, football game, and you listen to parents screaming and coaches screaming on the sidelines. Poor athlete, can you just visualize football players, athletes, Marcel, or any other sports, water polo, everyone's screaming. Can we just be in the shoes, as Kate likes to say?
Shall we set the scene?
Shall we set the scene? Okay. And this is really horrific. How can we ensure that the well-being and the mental health of young athletes are given the attention they deserve within this competitive environment? Should it be that competitive so early?
I wouldn't agree with introducing the aspect of competition very early, because as we've been seeing from Christian's keynote, in the beginning it should all be about the fundamental aspect. And in fundamentals there's no competitive mindset, which sometimes it might be the parent that's instilling that. But even from a recent experience that we had, when we removed the scores, we didn't even include scores. The players were asking, you shouldn't give him a point over that one, and we were like, there's no score here today. And the player was still insisting that I need to get a mark for that goal, or still, there's this score-focused, outcome-focused. But in order to ensure that we are treating these athletes from an individual point of view, we need to go back to the topic that we were talking about. We need to genuinely listen to the athlete. And by listening, it doesn't mean to the actual sound, even to the gestures, to the behaviors, to communications that they're having with other people rather than with ourselves. And even, for example, with me, whenever I have a referral from other practitioners, maybe. Other practitioners, obviously, because they are trying to make it as easy as possible as a referral. They give you a full summary of this person. To be honest, nowadays I started telling them, give me as brief as possible, because I don't want to enter the room with already a bias in my head of what this person is about. I want to create my vision of this individual based on what this person is telling me. Because if you're already giving me a summary, I'm already entering there with your summary of this person. Is that the real summary of this person? May I get maybe a different perspective once I hear this person's story? So that way I ensure that I'm genuinely listening to the person, genuinely seeing the behaviors of the person, and then I will base my decision through a collaborative approach between me and the athlete for a possible outlet of what's best. But other than that, we need to ensure, for example, that first and foremost, we teach these athletes from a young age simple life tools like self-reflection, like self-worth. How many people end up, for example, with the aspect of focusing on other competitors? This is quite a common thing, where anxiety comes from focusing on other competitors. And that comes from not having enough self-worth, not believing in ourselves as much. Because if you believe in yourself, you don't have to focus on what is the other athlete doing. That other athlete looks bigger than me, that other athlete looks faster than me, that constant comparison. No, focus on yourself and make sure that you're better than you were yesterday. And that should be your aim for long-term development, for sustainability. And if we teach these tools at a young age, we would have stronger athletes who might not even need our help at the end of the day. So maybe now we're needed to be there. And even at Liverpool John Moores, for example, when I was working there, the system was that every athlete had to attend at least once, twice, 4 times in a year. Minimum of 4 times a year that each athlete had to attend every sport professional. So even if they didn't have any physio issue, they would still go and see who the physio is, create a relationship. A minimum of 4 times requirements in a year to get the scholarship in that case. It was the first time that the Olympic Committee gave free sessions to athletes for different sport specific fields.
For the Solnation Games.
For this, exactly. But now it's continuing because now they are reimbursed. But yeah, I guess I'm realizing.
Want to add something?
Because you created a scenario, this scenario of everyone shouting. Coincidentally, with sports coach in Europe, we're doing a research in the Mediterranean countries. I'm saying that because probably there's not a question of water, but this could be an issue of the Mediterranean countries. So we're doing a research about harassment and abuse in sport. Malta is one of the countries in this, and I just want to put it out there. This shouting at kids, this shouting at athletes, this me going in the dressing room and bully an athlete to get a better performance, that's abuse. That's harassment. It's normalized in the sports context because that's how we become athletes. But it's abuse. It's harassment. And although it's normalized, it doesn't mean it's normal. So I think that's something we need to reflect upon. There's a research going on right now, but yeah, it's something we really need to reflect upon.
Ivan?
Just to add a bit to this, I understand it's an issue, but we also have to respect some changes which have been done across several associations to safeguard young athletes as well. For example, hats off for the Football Association, who removed the competitions early and ranking competitions early in their 13, 14 years of age and introduced festivals. Now, in basketball, we removed the 5 against 5 in mini basketball and we introduced the 3 versus 3. We removed scoring, we introduced junior referees. All these add up to the philosophy of long-term athletic development and the ratio percentage when it comes to looking at training training versus competition. Still, the culture of the parents, the culture of the people out there who are not educated in sport will make these things a bit more difficult to implement. But by time, hopefully, we'll get the parents educated and aligned with the philosophy of youth sport, youth development.
You just mentioned alignment. We've talked about collaboration. One point before we go to Colin and for the last question, is it possible to have mechanisms or some platforms using digital technology to achieve this collaboration? I'm thinking about an athlete. This is the biggest problem I encountered at the National Sports School during my 6 years there. When an athlete has a coach at the school, a coach at club level, and a coach at national team level. Just imagine if there is one athlete management system where the testing is being, and it is shared by all. Because after all, it's not about your system at school or with the club. It's about the athlete. It's about Janet. It's about Peter. It's about Jeremy. And all the coaches know what the other coaches are doing. We can share. Is it possible? Do you think there are mechanisms and platforms? Is there hope for achieving this?
There's always hope, George. Yes, I would like to share some concerns regarding this. Again, you mentioned in a few seconds, I heard sharing, I heard collaborating, I heard working together. So it all boils down to that, doesn't it? When I talk about tech, I'm not a high-tech guy, but I am a coach who eventually started to use video recordings to look at skill analysis. And we know that we've got athletes, for example, working in the National School of Sport, as well as in their clubs. So yes, definitely, one way how to enhance athlete performance would be not of giving them more of what they already do, but of identifying weaknesses and together, through the work they do at the National Sports School, for example, and the work they do in the club, they don't repeat the same stuff, but they help to added value. They maximize their time and training for a better athlete, individualized program. You mentioned use of technology and use of different ways of coming across, perhaps for parents, for athletes, for coaches. But I'm into education, and I find educating online through vlogs, through Zoom sessions, which are open for parents, which are open for coaches, which need to be run, not one-offs, but need to be run continuously across the full season of the year, and these need to be these need to be promoted, they need to be advertised. We tried a bit of an experiment during the COVID phase, where the Institute, we organized online sessions and Zoom talks, 1-hour sessions for all parents, for all sports parents. And the turnout was fantastic. So we pushed these ideas through online platforms, just inviting any parents who are interested to join these sessions, and the turnout was incredible, and the topics were related to, early late specialization, competing early, and the mindsets of young participants. So the interest is out there. Now, if you ask me who really attended, these sessions, perhaps we would like to have those who really need to attend to these sessions, but that's something else in the debate. I think opening up these platforms would be ideal in modern sport pedagogy, how to come across. And one thing which I would like, something which I would like, perhaps I have this in mind, traveling from and to work. On radios, there's always music. And now there's podcast. Perhaps it's high time we start, designing these sport-related coach education podcasts locally and try to get those across on radio, instead of listening to the same songs over and over again, it's good to, you're interested.
You give me an idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Colin, the last question. We started with you, and I intentionally wanted to finish off with you. Coaches play a crucial role in the lives of student athletes, especially in the context of balancing dual careers. How can, Colin, coaches be better equipped and supported to provide not only sporting guidance, but also emotional support to young athletes navigating the challenges of dual career environment? And furthermore, maybe what steps can organizations take to promote and nurture caring cultures within sports to ensure the well-being of both athletes and coaches? Caring, that's your field.
Okay, so two parts of the question then. So, first question, how can coaches do a better job of caring and supporting student athletes? I think we should start by recognizing that actually a lot of coaches do a great job of that. A lot of coaches are out there for low money or no money on a Tuesday night, okay, here in the sun, but maybe in England in the rain, and they're putting a lot of work in observing. So we need to appreciate that actually a lot of good caring skills are already in place, but we can still enhance that skills. So when we look at a lot of formal coach education, it's very much about the coach telling, technical and tactical. But actually, caring begins with observing people's needs and understanding those needs. So do we equip our coaches with active listening skills if we want them to be better listeners? 2 ears, 1 mouth. Do we help them to notice? Do we get them to allocate their resources? So the assistant coach, you watch these 3 tonight intently, and I'll watch these 3 instead. And a parent could decide, maybe, could you do me a favour? You just watch those 2 athletes and let me know how they get on in tonight's session. Because you're here every week watching, and I need an extra pair of eyes. So can we do a better job of noticing needs would be a starting point. We can formalise that. We were talking earlier on about English Academy football. In English Academy football, a coach will have a meeting 1-to-1 with a player, or maybe 2-to-1 with a player every 6 weeks. So the player gets an update about where they are, where their progress is, and what they can do to improve. But ideally those meetings are actually probably led by the player. The player telling the coach where they're up to, and what they're doing well, and where they want to improve. So we can formalise that through systems, but we can also do informal things. Maybe you're playing away at Gozo in a competition, you get on the ferry, make sure you sit next to one athlete on the way there, a different athlete on the way back. You've got 45 minutes where you can listen and notice. So we can do that informally as well. And nice comment I heard last night, be the first at breakfast. You can meet people and meet everybody. We can also help improve our coaches in terms of monitoring, using sports science. So do you know how to monitor the training load? I was interested to your comments there. We've actually done research with Karen over there and Nick, my colleague over here. They looked at triathlon and multidisciplinary sports, and they looked at who knows the best training load. And it turns out the coaches didn't know the training load of their athletes because they were only looking at their own discipline. And actually it was the parents who had a better idea of the training load because they were the ones taking them to every session. So let's use the parents. Can you tell me about your child? So that coach, parent, athlete triangle, it's a triangle because the parents got some knowledge that we don't have as coaches. The athlete has some knowledge that we don't have as coaches, and we've got some knowledge that they don't have, so let's put it all together. So let's monitor our athletes and use their science. And I'll quickly tell you a funny story online if you'll forgive me. A colleague of mine, sports scientist, worked in the Premier League Football Club, and he talked to me about the data tsunami, the amount of data that's collected on players. So every day the players would come into the training ground, how did you sleep last night on a score? know, have you been to the toilet? What colour was it? What did you drink? How are things at home? And the entire data collection. And one day the old school football manager met him and he said, you know, you collecting all this information, you know, what is it you actually do here? You know, this is the new manager. He was the new manager, but he was old school, and he came in. And he said, oh, well, Gaffer, that's how you talk to the manager. Gaffer, I'm the sports scientist, and I really want to care for the players, so I collect all this data, and I find out, you know, if they've slept well, if they have, you know, if they've eaten well, and stuff like that. And oh, great. And he went through the whole list of the data that they were collecting. And the Gaffer turned around and said, oh, I'm really glad you're here, but you know, I do something similar. And the sports scientist was shocked. This old school, experienced man, are you collecting data, Gaffer? He says, no. I shake hands with them every morning when they come in, and I look them in the eye, and it tells me whether they've slept or not, or if they're nervous. So spending a bit of time with the players might be the way forward here, as well as collecting the data to confirm that. So we can help and support coaches by educating them with their noticing, their listening, their relationships, but also collecting data to confirm that and give them the skills so that both the gaffer and the sports scientist and the parent potentially are doing a great job. The only problem with that, which takes me to your second question, is that that's hard work. And everybody here probably knows this. It's hard work to pay attention to somebody, whether it's a child or a family member or an athlete. It's hard work to think, what does this athlete need? And to then go and meet those needs. It's particularly hard work if you're volunteers. So you're working in a factory or an office and you're rushing in there and you're thinking about your own needs because you haven't eaten. You get into the track or the pool or the court. So it is hard work. So I think the second question, what can administrators do? I think we need to move beyond the coach-athlete relationship being responsible for all the care. We need to look at who else we've got around the environment. So maybe the performance environment, you've got a performance analyst. Their job is literally to observe players. But do we ever go and ask them, say, what do you think the players are doing? They're literally trained to observe players. Medical people are literally caring professionals. But again, do we go and talk to the physio and say, has anybody been in to see you a bit more recently? Has anybody mentioned anything? Because players will open up to the physio because they're not involved in selection. Do we go and as we spoke yesterday, talk to the sports site and say, look, you're here at the side of the pitch, can you watch some of these players for me? Give me an update. Can you watch who comes in and looks nervous? I've got to set up the cones, but can you watch them how they arrive? So can we embed a culture of care where other people look after each other? And to do that, you need to get the powerful people in the environment. And that's where it goes back to where we were talking earlier on about leadership. Because the powerful people, they're the ones who are likely going to be staying. You know, the manager might be moved on or the coach might be moved on, but the powerful people need to actually set the tone and set the standard that actually we're here for a caring culture. And they've got to reward that. So what we have to do is we have to reward coaches who are caring. We have to capture examples of that happening. We've got to show those examples so that other new coaches, younger coaches can say, that's the type of coach I want to be. That's the type of coach that gets rewarded. That's the type of coach that gets a sustainable position. We've got to do that when we advertise for coaching jobs. How many coaching jobs do we advertise and say, you've got to be a great listener? You know, how many do we say in the interviews, can you tell me an example where you cared for a player, as opposed to asking them about tactical and technical? So we've got to recruit caring coaches, reward caring coaches, praise caring coaches, set standards around and share that care burden so that it doesn't just all fall on the coach. Because if it all falls on the coach, they can do it for a while, but eventually they'll burn out. Because it is a form of labour. We know this from nursing, we know this from social care, looking after people, we know this from education, looking after people is tiring. So we've got to share that burden and have a caring culture so that actually when environment, so that the whole environment around the athlete is focused on observing their needs and helping them to flourish. I hope that helps, George.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
It's a tough challenge.
Yeah.
We're coming back in March. I hope you'll have it done by then.